Star Network. Peace, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Today, folks, we got a lot to get into. First, let's talk about environmental justice. We check in with Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, who is a former senior advisor for environmental justice with the EPA, to give us some of the latest developments about what the Biden administration is doing to combat the issue. Also, let's talk about HBCU funding and student loan forgiveness. We'll have that discussion. Later on, we check in and discuss the issue of the nuclear family. How has the nuclear family changed? We talked to Dr. Jacqueline Holland, who is a professor at Morgan State University, about family and consumer sciences, and more importantly, how the impact of multi-generational household will have on people, the children, and the community. And then later, another development I said I wouldn't talk about anymore, but I can't deny this one. Another development in the whole Oscar slap situation. We'll discuss that. And of course, I got trends posting doing the most. So stay riding with us. We got a lot to get to today here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Got a lot to get to. I'm very, very excited about sharing with you so many great conversations that we plan to have today. So thank you so much for tuning in. And certainly let your family and friends know that the culture is officially on air and we want to get all of your support. And of course, we'll be getting to your comments and your thoughts as we have these discussions. All right, let's jump right into it. First, let's talk about environmental justice. There has been a number of things that the Biden administration, I would say some wins that the Biden administration has put down as an effort in an effort to try to equalize the issue of environment as it relates to race, location, and so many other important factors to determine. Here to give us some insight about some of these latest developments and more importantly, how will they impact us, is Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali. You see my big brother on Roland Martin Unfiltered. He serves as the former senior advisor for environmental justice for the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. So we're going to have a conversation with him in a moment. And we're also going to be joined by Hassan Giordano, who serves as the owner of DMV Daily Media Group, to give us some insight about the politics of environmental justice. So let's first welcome Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali. Dear brother, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. How are you this afternoon?
I'm blessed, thankful, and also thankfully I'm busy. So it's an honor to be able to be here with you.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? Your time is very, very valuable. So we appreciate you spending just a few minutes with us today and giving us some of the big updates that many people probably haven't heard about and or they just don't know. So we truly appreciate that. Let me start the conversation off here, dear brother. I was reading a piece that ran in the Washington Post by a sister named Ashley Farmer, where she talks about, environmental justice has always been a part of the collective national agenda when it comes to Black people. She used the 1972 National Black Political Convention that happened in March of 72, 50 years ago, where 10,000 of our people gathered in Gary, Indiana for that great convention to move the conversation forward, to have a discussion about the Black agenda and the possibility of establishing an all-Black political party. But one of the big conversations that came out of that convention, dear brother, was the fact that environmental justice had to be on there. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it showed the significance of environmental justice, because essentially at that convention, which was only 2 years after the United States established the National Earth Day back in 1970, the big thing that came out of that conversation and that convention about environment was that environmental justice is a racial justice issue. It should be, and it needs to be, and always should be a part of the collective conversation about issues facing Black people in this country. Give us some insight on that, because I think that we often talk about some of the other things, like, you know, of course, schools and the politics and all of those things. But when we're talking about the environment, that's a really big part of everything we're discussing.
Well, you know, I try and break it down, brother, for folks in some simplistic ways. So first of all, thank you to the sister for making sure that she was illuminating, you know, the history of environmental justice. You can actually go back to 1968 when Dr. King was in Memphis and marching with the sanitation workers. They were dealing with a number of different impacts that they were being exposed to. So there were two parts of that conversation. One was on wages and people making sure that they were being paid more fairly. The other part of it was about the exposures that our brothers were dealing with at that time. And, you know, it has always been a part of what's happening inside of our communities. You can literally go back to, you know, the founding of this country, when indigenous brothers and sisters, land was being stolen and they were being taken away from their traditional foods. You can look at when we were brought to this country and enslaved, and the dynamics that were going on, putting us out and working in very horrible working conditions. That is a part of environmental justice and addressing it. It is also about being stripped of culture and your voice being heard. That is a part of environmental justice. And of course, the exposures that we have often had to deal with. I went back through history and looked at some of the jobs that we were doing, whether when we were paid or unpaid, and some of the exposures that were there. They've been going on for hundreds of years. So when we look at 1972 and moving forward, you know, the housing is a part of the environmental justice paradigm, because we are often, our homes have been placed in floodplains and some of the most dangerous locations next to polluting facilities, thereby impacting our bodies through whether it's air pollution or water pollution, which takes away the opportunities to be able, for kids to be able to learn, because they're dealing with these medical conditions because of the exposures. It takes away wealth in our communities, because often when we have these different types of polluting facilities placed in our communities, then it lowers our housing values and a number of other dynamics that are part of that. So when the sister raises that, and when we have individuals who are thinking a very holistic way, they understand that if we don't address the environmental racism, the environmental injustice happening in our communities, then we can never address the wealth gap that exists. And we will never be able to address, you know, the disparities that exist inside of healthcare and transportation and all these other issues that we all fight so diligently on. They are all a part of addressing environmental justice.
And I appreciate you kind of giving us some clarity. I want to share with you just one piece of this op-ed that she wrote, and letting people know that there is really, when we have this discussion, you know, we have it down there on our banner, that the white and Black difference in environmental justice, there is a big difference. This is what the journalist Ashley Farmer said from the Washington Post. She said, just as Earth Day whitewashed the Gary organizers' environmental concerns, so too does the environmental justice movement in America remain segregated today. White environmental interests and dollars tend to focus on preserving wildlife and green spaces, while activists of color focus primarily on preventing industrial plants and chemical waste from uprooting or polluting their communities. Meanwhile, the most recognizable climate change activists like Greta Thunberg are white, and activists of color remain relatively unknown and underappreciated. So we're talking, and Doc, we're talking literally like you. There's the same goal, quote unquote, but there's like a stark difference on what the focus is. Green space, power plants, two way too different issues, and it's like, you mean to tell me over the past 50 years that we have been traveling down this path about, oh man, we're going to do something for the environment, we're going to protect Mother Earth, but at the same time, there's still some real problems of this. There's not a lot of clarity on about which way we should go, especially if you are a Black environmental justice advocate.
Well, there's a lot of truth in what the sister shared with folks. Let me weave in a couple other pieces to this. You know, so one, you have to look at the funding that has been utilized in the past. And when you look at environmental justice organizations and networks, and there are literally hundreds of communities and organizations that are underneath of the networks, in many instances, they weren't receiving even 1% of the overall funding that was out there for environmental and climate and conservation work, if you will. Even though there are luminaries in the space who have been doing amazing work, they often did not get, the reporters didn't follow their work. They weren't highlighted in the magazines, and they most definitely weren't on television, where, some white brothers and sisters most definitely had those types of things. I appreciate your show, Roland's show, and a number of others, is because they're putting a spotlight on the issues, and the individuals are actually out there doing the work. That's a game changer, because our communities in the past did not get any shine from the media, which made it even more difficult to raise the funds to be able to make sure that your voice helped to influence policy, those types of things. Now, let me talk just real quickly a little bit about conservation and environmental justice.
Please.
And this is the way I explain it to those folks, who are just purely conservationists. They care about, national parks and state parks. So do our communities. We use a lot more of the urban parks. There's a study that came out 2 years ago that says that our national parks now are dealing with 98% of our national parks are now dealing with significant air pollution and impacts from the climate crisis. I bring them back to the point of asking the question, where's that pollution coming from? It is the pollution that has been placed inside of our communities that doesn't just stay in our communities. We get hit by it first. We are impacted first. But if you look at those smokestacks, the refineries, that pollution is then placed in our communities, but then moves and impacts these other types of places that other folks have placed more value on. When you look at historically transportation routes in our country and the racism that was built into transportation policy of bringing all those cars and trucks and other types of things through our communities and exposing us, that is now also moving. It is playing a role in the warming up of our oceans and of our planet when we look at this climate crisis that folks are dealing with. And at the same time, is also impacting what's going on there. For those folks who primarily care about wildlife, and there's nothing wrong with that, because we should actually own the fact that the real conservationists are indigenous brothers and sisters, and those of us of the African diaspora, because we're the ones who come from the land, and we're the ones who honored the land for millennia. So for those folks who are just interested in that space, the same pollution that has been making Black and brown folks sick is that same pollution that is also impacting wildlife and natural spaces and the other things that have been a part of their paradigm. So we have to realize that we have a common set of issues that are going on. They're hitting us in different directions, but if we truly want to win on these issues, then we have to honor what's been happening in Black and brown communities, and also understand that we have white brothers and sisters who should be standing in authentic collaborative partnerships and allyship with our communities and our organizations.
I want to bring one of our culture crew members, Brother Hassan Giordano, who is the owner of DMV Daily Media Group, who is a political and can give us some more insight about the politics behind that. Because I think with Doc, what you're expressing, and to Brother Hassan, what Doc is expressing about, just understanding the dynamics and understanding the struggles that Black and brown communities have been having with environmental issues. It seems to be that a lot of administrations, whether you're talking about the Biden administration or even the Obama administration, is still politically a hard thing to try to get a handle on, considering all of these working factors. Oh, you got your... Okay.
You got me now?
Yep, got you now. Go ahead, brother.
I don't even know how you put me behind this extreme brother, but politically, climate change and it being a civil rights issue, the problem is there's many people in the African American community who just don't understand and realize that. And the tragedy is that it's the silent killer that's really getting after our community that we're not even paying attention to, right? I mean, We can go to the grocery stores. We see, if you don't live in a food desert, you kind of see what's going on in stores that they do put in our neighborhood and the type of foods that they're offering you. But unfortunately, African Americans don't really talk about this. And in order for this issue to really come to light, as the doctor was talking about, is for shows like this to be able to show the disparity between what African Americans have to deal with as opposed to other cultures in this country. And so, I mean, if you look just at the news here in Baltimore just this week, where the Back River wastewater treatment facility was deemed by the Maryland Environmental Protection Agency was deemed unacceptable, an unacceptable threat to the environment and the public health. This is a facility that basically all of its water going to African American and low income families. And if they're deeming that now, imagine how long our people have having to endure this type of water in the systems, while at the same time they're increasing your water bills in these communities over and over, and they're saying it's for the aging pipes that have been there for so long. Well, if that's the case, then the water has to have been contaminated in these aging pipes for that long of a period of time. And then they're charging you water bills that they can't even prove that that's the amount of water that you have used, because they're estimated water bills. So there's so much when you talk about climate change and environmental issues that deal with African Americans in particular, that we really have to really kind of nail down on. Otherwise, things like Flint, the only people African Americans really know about that is because of the continuing news coverage that we've seen about that tragedy. Other than that, there wouldn't have been no understanding of what Flint actually was and what it does. And really, to this day, you really still don't get an understanding unless you look at programs such as this that really dig down deep, because the national news kind of glosses over it and doesn't really tell the real story on who it affected and how it affected.
That's absolutely true. And not to that point, Doc, that when you're talking about when you get to the dollars and cents of it, we are essentially, and I'm saying we as Black people, we as marginalized communities in this country, we are like paying for our own demise. You know what I mean? When Hassan talking about the way the water is filtered, when we're talking about, we're living on land that may be next to a power plant. When we're talking about, wires, electrical wires in the neighborhood, I don't live too far from a set of homes. I mean, these are brand new homes. They've probably been up there for less than 10 years, Doc. And literally, like, you can see the wires from, I'm talking about not just small wires, I'm talking about like major power lines, right there in the community. And every time I drive through that neighborhood, I ask myself, this can't be good. I mean, do they not know the impact that this might have on these families for years to come? In terms of, I've read stories about where people who have lived near power lines have gotten cancer, or when people who live near power lines, the air is different, or their electricity amount is the usage amount is higher. I mean, I'm wondering to myself, like, we're essentially paying for our own death in some cases. And I know that the Biden administration has recently put some money into various efforts with the EPA, but I'm wondering, Doc, is that going to be enough to just put some money behind it without some serious conversation about the injustice when it comes to these issues?
The money is a part of the equation. So I often say it is a step in the right direction, because for years, so like when I was leading some of the environmental justice work, we was lucky if we had $6 or $7 million for all the work that had to happen. And that was paying salaries and everything else. And now, underneath this administration, you see significant changes in that. The Office of Environmental Justice budget this last year was $12 million, getting ready to jump up to $100 million. But we have to also understand that that's just a drop in the bucket for what has to happen. There are literally a number of other agencies and departments that have a responsibility. They have a distinct responsibility to address this issue, because there are executive orders from President Clinton and now President Biden that says we're going to take an all-of-government approach. All-of-government approach means your resources, but it also means those tools And it also means that you are listening to the voices of communities about what their sets of expectations are. It is about contracting and subcontracting. Because when we often have these conversations, we forget that when we see these huge amounts of money, we see these $1 trillion budgets that are going to get passed. There's a huge amount of money that's going to move. The question becomes, will our communities, will our businesses be able to benefit from what's going on, or will the dollars go to the same folks that they always do? So EPA, $9.5 billion budget last year. This year coming up in the new cycle will be about $11 billion. And there'll be even, a couple $100 million additional dollars for environmental justice just from EPA. But again, we have to think broader. There are all these other agencies and departments who have even larger budgets that have to also be focused on holistic strategies inside of our communities. And here's why, real quickly, because as Brother Hassan shared, lots of times folks are like, I'm just not sure how this plays into what's going on in my household or in my neighborhood. Yeah. We have almost 200,000 people who die prematurely from air pollution every year in our country. Disproportionately, it is Black and brown folks who are dying. And just let me put that in perspective for all of us who are social justice advocates and activists. More people are dying from air pollution than are dying from car crashes. More people are dying from air pollution than are dying from overdoses of drugs. More people are dying from air pollution that are being killed by the police. So all of those things we all work hard on, but we got more folks who are dying from air pollution. And that's before we throw COVID into the mix, because if you had exposures from air pollution and got one of these pre-existing medical conditions, then we had even more folks who were dying in relationship to COVID. And we know COVID and other pandemics are not going anywhere. When we look at what Brother Hassan, I think, mentioned as well around food, and he had mentioned food insecurity. Well, these impacts that are happening in our communities that are playing a role in driving the climate crisis, the price of food that we see now, because of what's going on with Russia and other places, the climate crisis is going to be 10, 20, 50 times worse in the price that you're going to pay. So who is it that's going to be hit the most by that? It's going to be Black folks, right? And you can go down the laundry list. When Brother Hassan talked about the price of water, well, as water becomes a shrinking resource, then you know that there are going to be people who have power and money who are going to try and hoard that. And of course, it's going to go up. So we just have to be thinking critically in this moment. One, about the sets of opportunities that we have to not only have jobs. Everybody talks about jobs. Jobs, that's a cool thing. I'm focused on people owning their own businesses in this space. If we know it's going to be $1 trillion industry, this new climate economy or clean economy folks talk about, then we should have our folks focused on getting our share of that. And here's why. Because these are our tax dollars that folks are utilizing. Brother Muhammad, you talked about, how we are literally paying for our own demise. You didn't say anything that wasn't true in that statement, because people are taking our tax dollars. Folks who worked during COVID-19 on the front lines out there being, with the chances of being infected and impacted, kept going to work, paying their taxes. And we've had all kinds of examples over the years of how we are always out there holding it down for everybody else and getting hit both in our pockets and our health. It's time for us to change that paradigm and start to position ourselves to address the wealth issues in our community and to address the health issues in our community.
So there are a couple of big things, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head, Doc. The Congress gave $100 million for environmental justice activities recently. There was a bump for enforcement and Superfund cleanups in that space. There's also that this administration, according to the EPA, would see the highest funding ever under Biden's budget plan. And you're talking about he wants to boost the budget by nearly 30%, 28.8%, its highest level ever, including significant heights for environmental justice, which includes boosts for staffing, longstanding air, water, and chemical programs. He's putting some money in this 2023 budget for this, but I think going back to your initial point, you said, well, who is going to get it? Now that we know that white environmental activists and Black environmental activists are heading in two different directions, and are focused on a number of different things, how do we either bring those folks together, or how do communities start to get empowered enough to say, okay, if we're going to get a piece of the pie, we know that they're going to give it to white conservation projects. How can Black folks start working on environmental justice as it relates to these other issues? How can that happen?
Well, first of all, let's give a quick shout out to Michael Regan, the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, who is a brother and who also cares a lot about environmental justice. So I just want to make sure we raise his name up.
Oh, absolutely.
The other part of it is, those who are part of the funding streams have to make sure that the resources are bringing people together and also focusing on what communities are asking for. So foundations have played a role over the years in this separation, if you will. They have to build criteria into those dollars to make sure that they are focused and anchored inside of our communities. I don't have a problem with, other organizations playing a role, as long as they understand that they don't have to play a leading role. They can be a partner in the process, because there are environmental justice organizations all across our country who know what needs to be done, and in many instances know how to do it, or folks can partner with them. So I understand that we are running out of time. I deal with some of the best scientists around the world. We only have a few years left to begin to make the changes and move in the direction, or all of us are going to be in a significant problem. So we got to get together. Here's the other point I want to raise for folks, and I really want people to pay attention to this. Even though we got hundreds of billions of dollars that are moving through the feds, they're going to go to the states, and then they're going to go to county governments. And we know that there are states who have never cared about what was going on inside of our communities. And that's where the accountability has to happen. Because if we don't, we will have governors who, just like they didn't utilize the healthcare dollars because they had a political agenda, just like there have been some who said, you know what, I'm going to use these dollars to build prisons. We got to make sure there's real accountability, that these dollars are going to the spaces and places that need them the most, and that we are not continuing to create sacrifice zones, and that we are moving folks from trauma to transformation.
I love it. I love it, Doc. I know you got a hard stop at 3:30. So what I think we should definitely say, we know that Earth Day is coming up next month. It sounds like we need to redefine what Earth Day means, especially for Black and brown communities. Yes, we can plant some trees, we can clean some parks, but we need to do that hardcore work of making people accountable, and more importantly, to start organizing around this issue. So, I think that's the other part of this whole process, is that, to Hassan point into your point, that in order to educate people or get people excited or get people engaged in this process, we have to speak to their interests and speak to their needs. And the interests and needs of Black folks right now, like you said, air pollution, power lines, plants, chemical factories, illegal dumping of all types of garbage in our neighborhoods. Those are the things that we gotta bring to the governments, to the local government, and all the way up to the national government, to make sure that they understand, this is Earth Day. We're going to celebrate Mother Earth, but you're going to do right by Mother Earth's people first. So, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, I appreciate you, dear brother, for giving us some updates and some things to think about as it relates to environmental justice, brother.
Thank you. Y'all continue to stay blessed. Peace and power.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about HBCU funding and the ongoing conversation about student loan forgiveness. We'll be chatting with my man and culture crew member Hassan Giordano to give us some updates about what's happening there. Why is the president so slow to cancel student loans? Why is there a continued effort to make sure that HBCUs are funded? We'll have this conversation. So stay with us. A lot to get to in the next 30 of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, as we talk about the environment, now we're going to shift gears to talk about HBCUs and funding. Now, the president has put forth his proposal for a major budget, over $5 trillion. And as part of that budget, the president wants to earmark some money for HBCUs. Now, this is not the first time the president has done this. This is the second time that the president has tried to make sure that HBCUs are getting its just due of money to support programs. Now, in this country, we have a little bit over 100 HBCUs and $65 million. Can you imagine that? $65 million with over 100 institutions have to be divvied up. And as a result of that, there is still some questions and some possible resistance to making sure that HBCUs just get the very little bit of money that they get already, not talking about extra money. So we want to bring back Hassan Giordano, who is who's the owner of DMV Media Group, DMV Daily Media Group, to give us some insight about the politics of giving money to HBCUs. Hassan, one of the things that I'm looking at with this president is that he got his fiscal budget for 2023. And one of the big highlights of the budget was the significant amount of funds that he wants to allocate to HBCUs. Now, as I mentioned, this is the second year in a row that he's asked the Department of Education for some dedicated funding for HBCUs. So here's what Rodriguez Murray, who serves as the UNCF Senior Vice President for Public Policy and Government Affairs, said about this issue of getting money to HBCUs. He said that the administration is calling for the HBCU funding, which all 100 plus HBCUs share. And I want to make sure we put this up on the screen, that the administration is calling for the HBCU funding for which all 100 plus HBCUs share to be increased by $65 million. And I want to correct myself because I said that was with the cost of it, but that's the increase, folks. So my apologies on that. But to be increased by $65 million to finally meet the authorized level of funding. This is UNCF's top priority Additionally, the request for the Pell Grant to be increased by $2,000 in the upcoming year is nothing short of landmark. If Congress follows through on President Biden's UNCF-supported request, it would be the largest single-year increase to the Pell Grant, put us on course to double the Pell Grant this decade, and be one of the biggest game changers for low to moderate income students in our country in modern times. This again from Rodriguez Mary, who serves as the Senior Vice President for UNCF. Why, Brother Hassan, we know the power, the value, the significance of HBCUs, yet seems, again, second year in a row that HBCUs are not getting the money that is necessary or not getting that is due. Why is that?
Because honestly, Black people and Black voters are always pushed to the bottom of the totem pole after the campaign, right? They always promise. Look, President Biden got in office strictly off of African. He would have never won South Carolina had Congressman Clyburn and African Americans not pushed him over the top, thereby never winning the presidency. Because had he lost South Carolina, he would have been done out of the presidency in terms of the primary. So he would have never been president had it not been for African Americans and overall young people. So the two bigger issues you would think that this president would make sure he gets done is the increase in HBCU funding and to call off all student loan debt, right? These are two very important issues to young people, African Americans. And the third one is to the Voting Rights Act, right? The John Lewis Voting Rights Act that we've seen him punt the ball on over and over again. Right. Doc made an interesting point before he left about the funding and where that funding goes, right? The only legislative victory that this administration has had thus far is infrastructure. Infrastructure only got passed through Congress because even Republicans in the Senate had to sit back and realize that when that money comes through, they know many of their white donors, their major donors, will get the money from this infrastructure deal. Many of our people won't get it. We're going to be subs. We're not going to be primes. We're going to be subs on a lot of those contracts. We're not getting nearly the amount of money we need to get from the amount of money that went into the infrastructure. Same thing with HBCUs. You look what you read. The increase, $65 million stretched over 100 HBCUs. That means that's less than $1 million per HBCU that they're asking for in an increase. Take, for instance, Maryland. Maryland HBCUs, 4. They had to fight for 15 years in the court system to be able to get the type of money to put them on a level playing field of white institutions of higher learning. Those institutions were taking programs that were traditionally taught by HBCUs and putting them into their institutions, kind of taking away student population that would have went to HBCUs. They had to fight for 15 years just for a settlement of $577 million when the governor and the legislature kept offering them like $100 million or $200. Finally, it took for a judge, a federal judge, to weigh in and say, no, you need to give these people what they deserve and then some for them to actually win after 15 years. Yeah. You're going to see this play out over and over, Farajii. The president is going to offer this glimmering new, I'm going to give this type of money, knowing that Congress, look, they can't get anything passed in the Congress in terms of voting rights and in the Build Back Better. You honestly think that they're going to actually get through and make a priority of HBCU funding one of their major priorities before this upcoming midterm? I don't think so.
So that's the other part about this. There, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Hassan, but there is no quote unquote federal mandate to give a certain amount of money to HBCUs in practice right now. There's nothing like that as at this point. Is that correct?
Right. So the mandate is in terms of school systems, but there is no mandate for HBCUs per se. Most mandates, even locally and statewide, are to adequately fund K through 12 education and then when it comes to universities and colleges, there's no mandate from government in terms of how much that they will receive if they receive what they receive. So again, there's no formula. You know, when you've had formulas in the past for underperforming schools or schools that were not getting the funding that they deserve in localities such as Detroit, Chicago, right here in Baltimore, you've seen lawsuits that can contend with the formula that needs to be put into place. That's how we got the blueprint for success here in Maryland, because there was a lawsuit that had to go in back in the day called Thornton that had to challenge the education formula on how much money these schools should deserve. Unfortunately, HBCUs are not under that category, and that's why here in Maryland they had to fight in a lawsuit to do it, but they couldn't even do it, Farajii, based off the funding level. What they had to prove was that these white institutions were stealing the programs in which they traditionally had at HBCUs in order to take away their student population. And they showed that and they proved that. And then they categorized how much money they were losing because of that. And that's what went into how much money the judge felt like they should be given and allocated. So the problem is, you're right, there is no mandated formula on exactly how much, and presidents by presidents differ on how much financial impact they're going to have on HBCUs, if at any. If anything, the Trump administration can at least note that that was an issue that they did at least one time put up some funding for. But if you go back president by president, many presidents really didn't make HBCU funding a main priority.
So this is because the President Biden and his administration announced a $2.7 billion in funding for HBCUs. And, you made this point, Hassan, and this is getting like this playbook, this strategy is getting old, so old, bro. Like the president might put forth something very spectacular, but then he puts it on the shoulders of Congress to move it forward. And I'm wondering to myself, like, Mr. President, can't you do an executive order? Can't you do something to use your bully pulpit to force certain things to happen? Because you're right. If we got to keep going to Congress and like Mr. Michael Lomax, the president and CEO of UNCF, he said, he said this. He said, I call on every congressional leader who values education to take every single investment proposed by the president and make sure it is included in the final law. These investments are needed, and it is past time they should be signed into statute. And what I'm hearing from that, Hassan, is a man who's basically begging, who's pleading with Congress to invest in these institutions. But who wants to do that each and every year? My heart goes to HBCU presidents and those who are responsible to figure out, well, where's the money going to come from over this next year, over the next 2 years or 3 years? If you got to keep going back to Congress and lobbying them for something that the country has, we all know, has benefited from. HBCUs graduate Black professionals across the board at a higher rate than any other educational institution. We know that. Yet we are always got to come to the Congress with hat in hand, asking for them to consider, to fall back on their moral compass, to think about us. And it's getting to be very old and tiring.
It really is. Because we're back to the pre-Jim Crow era, when we're still getting scraps from the table, begging master to give us just a little bit of what they have left over, right? What gets me is, look at, and I hate to use this as an example, but it is what it is. Look at the type of money that Congress can come up with in an instant when it comes to the pandemic. They're right now asking for another $22 billion to help with a pandemic that's really on its back end, right? We're basically to the finish line and getting past it. But this $22 billion that they need in such a hurry is for add more testing and, more booster shots for Americans and so forth and so on. But they have a mandate quickly to come up with this money, when they feel like it, when they feel like it's something that is of importance to them.
Yeah.
And the problem that the American people should have, and it shouldn't just be African American, the American people should understand this, that if you continuously underfund and undervalue institutions like HBCUs and things that serve the interests of African Americans, Black and brown individuals who are quickly becoming the majority in this country, it's going to end up hurting you on the back end.
Right.
So it's better to fund it on the front end so that we see. I never understood how we have a system that rewards athletes at millions and look at Deshaun Watson, $250 million contract guaranteed, and yet you have teachers who help put him there who are getting $250,000 over 4 years. That's their salary over 4 years, not 1 year.
Right.
They might get that over 4 or 5 years of his contract. Right. So I just think that how we value education. One thing I always remind legislators here in the state is our Constitution says there's only 2 mandates in the state constitution for them to actually do is balance the budget and adequately fund K through 12 education. Now, adequately fund is, you can debate that, whatever, but education should always come first. And I take, for those African Americans serving in Congress, my Congressman Farajii and Fullman and others, especially those who are graduates of HBCUs, this is their job to be rallying and making sure that any president that sits in there that, hey, guess what? You're not getting anything, my vote for anything, unless you first make sure that HBCUs have this amount of money put into your budget. And then on the back end, Clyburn, who's the whip of the Democratic Party in the House, you have to then make sure that your party leadership then follows through to say, if the president puts it in, we have to make sure that we get this through by hook or crook. And they tend not to put education, and especially that education of Black and brown, anywhere near their top legislative priorities.
Absolutely. Danita checked in on our YouTube page and said people vote and then they sit back and don't keep their foot up the rooter to the tutor. They have to be held accountable every second.
Yep.
Which I do. Jane L said we have to better organize into concentrated lobbying groups to get our special interests taken care of. There are so many little chiefdoms when it comes to political action. Is that the case that you're seeing with this whole HBCU drama?
It is. I mean, even if you look at so what people have to realize in politics is, and I love what the sister said, it's not just voting. You can't just vote and just sit back, kick back, and complain that they didn't do what you wanted them to do, and then probably vote for them again 4 years later or 6 years later because you just don't know anybody else on the ballot. That's not what voting is. Voting is a process. And one of those processes is going to the ballot box. The other process is, like she said, keep your foot on their neck. You represent their interests. But beyond that, politicians only respect 2 things, and they both deal with numbers: money and individual voters. So if you can show them the influence that you have, and that's why I've always advocated to make sure that African Americans in particular have PACs, political action committees, with money in it. And we're starting to see them pop up across the country. There's a good one right down in Atlanta, but they're really just dealing with the funding of great candidates, African-American candidates. But even after that, you need lobbyists and you need media to be able to control the narrative. The narrative right now is all about student loan forgiveness. That student loan forgiveness really isn't about us, right? That's really coming from a different byproduct of this country. Part of the narrative that needs to be pushed within the media is that funding of HBCUs. So until we get the type of funding we need in the PACs, in the lobbyist groups that are in Congress, making sure that these priorities are front and center in their face, and then communications wise to be able to make sure the narrative is being pushed on what we need to get done, because we're letting Biden off the hook when it comes to voting rights. That was one of our #1 priorities.
Yeah.
And he basically just gave it to Congress, didn't put any emphasis behind it, no real push behind making sure it got done. Any of the piece. They got 3 different voting rights bills. None of them did he get done, and kind of just said, oh, well, can't get it done. Move on to the next. Didn't put any type of, you've seen the administration put a lot of emphasis behind Build Back Better, which failed. A lot of emphasis behind the infrastructure, which actually got done. And that only got done, like I said prior, because that was money going to people that don't look like us, but do put into their campaign coffers. And that's another thing that we have to realize. If you understand that we know that we have people that represent our interests, if you want somebody that's going to go up there and be a fighter, you also have to donate to their campaign, because that's a part of the process, right? We can't complain. Yeah. And then when we have a great candidate, we don't want to give no money. And then we wonder why they got their butt beat.
Right. Now let's talk a little bit about that, because as much as we talk about HBCUs, we got to talk about the plight of students, and those, especially students who are saddled right now, Brother Hassan, with debt from college, student loans. What's the likelihood that the president is going to move forward on canceling student debt at $50,000? Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley has tweeted about this again, saying, quote, canceling student debt is a racial justice issue because racist policies like redlining have prevented Black families from building generational wealth and forced them to borrow at higher rates than white folks. But there is like, Senator Warren, Elizabeth Warren, Chuck Schumer. They're working with Representative Ayanna Pressley to push the president to forgive $50,000 in student loan debt. But it still seems like, Chuck Schumer said, hey, call the president, write the president.
Right.
Like
because
what?
That's not an issue that's not a hill they want to die on, right? Because you got to think about the average age of Congress is, I think at this point, like 61, right? It used to be 55, I think now 60. They don't have student debt. They're worried about retirement at this point, right? That's what if you want to fight retirement and pension and anything that they deal with, then you may be able to have a hill that they're going to fight on. So that's not something that they're willing to go to bat for until you put pressure on them. You're starting to see a little bit of more pressure being put on this issue. I don't think the president is going to cancel student debt at any level, because I think while it's a great campaign bite and issue that you kind of sound the alarm, hey, yeah, this is an issue in our country. The same individuals that they owe money to are the same ones putting millions of dollars into their campaign coffers. And so at the end of the day, they also got to realize that it could financially shake up, whether it's the stock market or whether it's the system that they've built at large. I just don't see it. Now, remind you, he has suspended student loan debt at the start of the pandemic. Right. And many of people are calling on him to extend that extension. And he'll probably do that because that's the easier thing to do. But this is one in particular that you talked about, executive order. Presidents can't do executive orders on many things, but this is one thing that he can do that he does not need Congress for, in terms of canceling a level of student debt, that I'm just not sure that this president has the testicular fortitude to actually follow through with that campaign promise.
Is it that he doesn't have the testicular fortitude, or we just not keeping the foot up the ass?
No, I think they are. I think he's being reminded of it on a regular. But
I mean, he can be reminded, but I mean, it still seems like, I mean, look, if we were to break it down, we don't have time to do it today on this show, but if you were to break it down, how much $50,000 would cut down on not just on debt, but it would free people up to do other things with their money. I mean, that's this, and I mean, there have been studies about this. Like I said, Ayanna Pressley has talked about, this is a way to lead to generational wealth. All of these things, and every time we talk about these issues, Brother Hassan, I go back to the point. It's like you always got to convince the morality of an individual to try to do the right thing, and it's like that's get tiring. Like what? When can a person just do the right thing at the right time because it's the right thing to do at the right time?
Well, that's why I always told you, brothers, is I know you ain't built for politics, because that's just not what happens in politics at all. What's right. And the sad part is that is the reality of politics, right? The sausage making process. It ain't sexy, but you're right. I think in many aspects, if you look at even from the monthly child tax care credits that they were giving parents last year until December, right? That ended. That was a part of the Build Back Better program that was building generational wealth, right? That they talked about. Whereas though it was only a couple $100 a month, that was basically theirs anyway. They were going to get on the back end once a year when they filed their taxes. It actually helped parents do a lot more things. This freed up wealth. The same thing we can do with forgiving this student loan, right? It's not like you're just forgiving billions of dollars of somebody who may have racked up, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you're doing it in such a way that it's responsible, and while that may not mean a lot to somebody with a lot of money, with somebody who's struggling to get by, you got to understand, you went to college and got this debt to be a better person, right? To get into a profession that you thought would get you in a stable lifestyle, to provide taxes that go back to the government. So in a hustler's mindset, it's okay, I'm gonna give you something on the front end because I'm gonna get it back at some point on the back end. But I think it was just that they've built a process for Farajii that he realizes now that it sounds good in theory, but if I do this, how far will this upset the apple cart? The process in which we built. Will this have a direct effect on the stock market or on America's economy that may end up hurting me more than helping me? And I think that's part of the politics that he's considering, because if it was that easy, and if it was so easy, I think he would have done it. And so I just think that he's starting to deal with the reality of being president, and not campaign promises are good when you're a candidate, but when you have to govern, it's a whole different thing.
Man, it's a whole different thing, Hassan. But let me just tell you this, brother. If we can't get a win on this HBCU thing, I don't know how many more losses we can take from this administration that claims to be the administration that's going to fight for Black people in this country. I'm gonna be honest with you. I mean, I'm serious. And folks, I mean, I know many people are checking in and like, oh man, things are. If we can't, voting rights and policing and economy and COVID response, and now you get hit with this HBCU thing, and it's like 0 for 20. You know what I'm saying? Like this administration, and I'm talking about on bread and butter issues that we said at the very beginning of the start of this administration were important. So this is not like brand new stuff. This is stuff that we said at the beginning. This is stuff that he even said he was going to make happen. Now I get it that the Congress but you got a slim margin, because come November, you and I know it, and we're going to talk more about it as we get closer. Republicans take Congress.
He's done.
It's done.
Nothing's getting done.
Nothing is getting done. And we're not going to get no wins. And we're going to walk, and this administration is going to walk out of this White House disappointing its most loyal supporters, followers, constituents. That's what's going to happen. That's
the difference between Democrats and Republicans. And as an independent, I have to say it. A Republican administration, especially the last one we just saw, would not care about a deadlocked Congress, especially if they got a slim majority. They would have got them in a room and said, you're going to pass this or we're going to have a problem. I'm going to make sure that you don't win re-election in your upcoming midterms, or if you got a local. They even went all the way down to their council person. I'll make sure your council colleague gets, booted out if you don't get this done. And a lot of stuff would have been done by executive order, even if it would have skirted the line of being possibly legal, because they would have dealt with that on the back end. But what they would have done is serve the interests of those who put them there. You've never seen them kind of skirt the line like you're talking about, take a step back and take a defeat one after another and just been okay with it. They fight for things. And that's what Democrats got to start to do. Stand up and fight for. Stop using that excuse, oh, it's the Republicans. They ain't letting us, no, you got a 50 vote majority. Just because you can't control Manchin and Sinema, that's part of your party. You need to get them in a room. I don't care if you got to threaten them, whatever you got to do it. Get this stuff done.
Yeah.
Otherwise, November comes, Democrats are going to take a shellacking, beat upside their head. And then 2 years from now, we'll mess around and get the orange guy back in office.
Oh, my God. We're not talking about that joker right now. All right. Hey, Hassan, always good to talk to you, brother. Look forward to reconnecting with you next Thursday. Hassan, Mr. Politics Giordano, the owner of DMV Daily Media Group. Thank you, Brother Hassan, for being a part of the culture today.
Always a pleasure, brother.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's talk about family. I'm asking a question. The nuclear family, is that gone like the wind? Is it over with? Will you just have a mom, dad, daughter, son? Or are we in a different, better space where you have multi-generational households, especially in Black and brown communities? We check in with Dr. Jacqueline Holland, a professor at Morgan State University, who shares her thoughts as she looks at the issue of family and consumer science. We'll have that conversation up next here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network. Stay with us.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back. Welcome back to the second hour of The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I just wanted to have a conversation about something culturally that is happening in our neighborhoods and in our communities, because I think every so often we should do a check-in about where we are with family. Now, this institution of family has been touted as being the building blocks of any successful community. But today, the question is being asked, well, what makes the family? There was an opinion piece that was written in the New York Times by a woman by the name of Jessica Gross, who wrote this piece called "The Nuclear Family is No Longer the Norm. Good," saying that the nuclear family of mother, father, daughter, son is outdated. It is a concept, a narrative that was that started from the 1950s, and now we're in a different place when it comes to family structure. That multi-generational households are now the building blocks of communities, especially within Asian, Black, and Latino communities. Here to give us some understanding of the changing dynamic of families is editor and professor of family and consumer science at Morgan State University, Dr. Jacqueline Holland. Dr. Holland, thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Farajii. It's always a pleasure to be with you and to hear what you're talking about. I enjoy it. I love it all the time.
Awesome. Dr. Holland, when we talk about this, I want to just share with you some statistics. Then we talk a little bit about the changing dynamics of the household. According to census data, the Pew Research Center, they put out a new report, found that multi-generational living has grown sharply in the U.S. over the past 5 decades, so over the past 50 years, and shows no sign of peaking. They found that the population living in multi-generational households in the United States has quadrupled since 1971. And in March of last year, nearly 60 million people were living with multiple generations under one roof. And they're saying that these are common in Asian, Black, and Latino households, but are also on the rise among white Americans as well. I'm wondering, and I want to get your take on this, that when we look at family right now, is family, first and foremost, Doc, you've studied family dynamics. This is what you do, but is family still valued and seen as being a significant part of the community? Is family still seen in value as it was 50 years ago, as being the source of power for a community and for a country?
Yes, very much so. I think, with family and consumer sciences, I'm a human scientist. And, part of our goal is that we're impacting individuals who are part of a family, and the family is part of the community. So if we can impact individuals in a positive way and teaching them how to, go through life, those adulting skills, those world life skills that people need, we impact that family who live in the community. So very much so, family is the crux. And whatever happens in that family often impacts, for generations to come. So it's so important to make sure that we really nurture it. From creation, we were made to be part of a family. So that doesn't go away, as time goes on, but it's still the crux. It's still essential and valuable as we think about relating, with one another.
So how does this work? I mean, multi-generational families, if you have mom there, or if you have mom and dad, or if you have dad there, then you might have grandma there, then you might have auntie there, right? Then you got to throw some children up in the mix. What are the pros and cons of a multi-generational household? And the particular, we could say either psychological impacts that household will have on a community, and more importantly, on the children.
Well, I think the pros, I remember, a few generations ago, we'd have the latchkey kids.
Right.
And the latchkey
that
kids
was me.
were...
That was me, Doc. I had a key, came in the house, nobody was home. Yes, that was me.
Right. And nobody was there. And it was also during that time when children were really being exploited because, they'd have this key, people watch us, right? And they would see these children being alone. And so they would take advantage of them in many ways, compared to if a child can go home and there's an individual there who can greet them, who can have conversation with them, who can kind of digest like what happened in school today. That's a totally different animal. So the fact that I'm coming home and it's not just my parents, it could be my grandparents. And I have that example in my own family that oftentimes with my nieces and nephews, though they may not be able to talk to their mom and dad, they can have a conversation with me and I can listen and hear and all of that. So that's very important. And then also to see how that because generations differ in how they think, how they view things, their perspective, how they solve problems. And the fact that this child can see the different ways that all of these things are happening in the world, their grandparents or auntie or even uncle or cousin versus mom and dad. It also, there's that whole community of being together, and that we're one. We can tackle problems together. We can see how we will work it out as a family. One of the negative things could be I have less space, right? So if I have a lot of money, if I'm wealthy, I can have a large home and everyone can have their own room. But what if I'm not? What if I don't have access, economically to those resources? Then therefore my little space becomes narrower and narrower, smaller and smaller. And I think we saw some of that during COVID, right? Because at least before COVID, everyone could go out, go to school, go to work, wherever they go, and do part of their life.
Yeah.
And then come home later on and then, talk with family and tell what happened. But then with COVID, everyone was there. So it became strained in some way. And everyone is trying to find their own little niche, in finding their space that they can do school. Here I'm at the university, and many students were like, man, I miss being there. I want to come and be on campus because in my home, I don't have the resources, I don't have the space, things such as that. So that can really be a challenge.
That could be a huge challenge. I want to bring in Culture Crew member Oyen Adeoyen, who is a journalist for various publications. But Oyen, good afternoon. And as we talk about this, Oyen, I mean, there have been a number. You have written actually about a lot of these dynamics of community and family dynamics. What's your take on this about the nuclear family changing, especially changing dramatically over the past 15 years with the increase of multi-generational households?
I think that it's definitely expected. The idea of the nuclear family in general, especially when you look at households that are not just, African American, but also immigrant households and who are used to kind of living with their grandmothers, their aunties, people that are just outside of what we would consider the nuclear family. Like this is their norm. So to kind of have this come out as this is going to be more of the majority for a lot of us. I know for me, my parents immigrated here from Nigeria. That's a very commonplace practice.
And when you say that the immigrant family, I mean that's a whole different dynamic because Dr. Holland, folks are coming across the waters with a lot of different family members, whether it's an uncle or aunt. I mean I guess the criteria for them to get across the water serves as the priority versus who pays for the bills.
Yeah.
And so I mean I'm wondering that if we look at how families are constructed, I mean one of our watchers on YouTube said COVID broke up the Black family. Lana, she said COVID broke up the Black family even more. I mean, when we have these kind of like national crises or these big moments, whether it's police brutality, whether it's COVID, I mean, these are some serious challenges that can disrupt families. How do households make sure that they stay intact or they stay together in the midst of these crises? And Dr. Holland, I'd like to get your thoughts on that first.
Yeah, that is so important because we live in a society. I appreciate you talking with the guest that was on before, where we have this systemic racism on every level with all of the housing and food and, school and all of that happens, that goes on. And of course, we know that the Black family was impacted the most just because of the occupations, the careers that we have, and being involved with people. So it really is a strain. And I think for many people, it's their faith. It's that spirituality that they kind of dig down deep into that helps them to go through. And I think through generations, that's been our saving grace, for many of us, in African American community. And then and because we do things in community, oftentimes reaching out to others and asking for help or assistance where that is available. And I know I've seen that a lot during this whole pandemic where, that was the case.
Right. And also, Oyen, when you're talking about making sure that these families are getting the necessary services and resources, that can put a very big strain on families, especially when we talk about, for example, like the census. If you're counting the people that are in your households, which determines how resources are allocated, where money is spent, and all of those things. But you're in a neighborhood where you have a whole bunch of these multi-generational households and these multi-generational families, but the resources are already limited. That could put a major strain on a particular community, especially in low income or what we've seen in Black and brown communities.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I think is a discussion that needs to be talked about more. The dynamic of those who are in the household is changing. How do we readjust our state level, assistance programs, our community level assistance programs to account for what that change looks like? Because often you'll see, natural changes like this occur, but then there's nothing being done in terms of programming or local legislation in order to reflect that change. And so certain issues like the scarcity of resources and just lack of financial assistance will continue to persist and then worsen.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking, Dr. Holland, that, if there are lack of resources, then somebody's not going to get the necessary help that they need. Somebody is not going to get the services that they need help with. And as a result of that, it might just be a situation where, and I've lived in these type of neighborhoods, especially in Baltimore, where you have all of these people in this household, you have these families, and then, it just seems like it's every man for himself type of deal when it comes to resources, when it comes to getting money. And this is the unfortunate part about living especially in low income or moderate income communities, where it's almost like a survival of the fittest mindset that is created as a result of families are trying to figure out how to navigate through life, how to make sure that they can support one another. It becomes this kind of like, us versus the world type of mentality.
Right. And, again, I go back to your guest before when you were talking about, forgiving the college debt. Because, if you think about it, you spent 4 years investing in getting a greater knowledge so you can get a great job, but yet you leave with all this debt. That's still a strain, like on your family, on
oh
you.
My God,
If
yes.
You're creating a family. Many individuals here, like they already have a family and then they want to do better and get a college education. So I think it still goes back to our government to really look like, what can we do? Or do we, even as African Americans, do we need to do more writing? Do we need to go up to doors, knock on doors, do the political advocacy thing? And oftentimes we don't, do that. But the ones who speaks the loudest often gets what they need to get.
Yeah.
And I just think maybe as a people to be more politically savvy, learn how to do that, and then to go sit at those doors, knock on those doors and say, hey, we need this.
Absolutely. I want to bring another culture crew member, Rashad Staton, who is an activist and educator who's been working in the nonprofit sector for years. Rashad, thank you so much, brother, for joining us for this conversation as well, brother. Rashad, you worked in the area of family engagement for the Baltimore City Public School System. You're no longer with the school system, but you worked in there. What was your experience of seeing children in the multi-generational households, or did you come across a lot of households like that?
Yeah, I've seen it every day. That was a part of our work, the work that we done under the Family and Communication Department. It was a strategy that we took with very good intentionality and approach of understanding the diversity and the dynamic of where the family structures are today. This multi-generational one of you sharing a household with your grandparents, the immediate parent and the child, and close siblings and relatives all living within. And then our approach within the educational system was, how do we service all of those that are part of this family collectively to advance the students' on educational improvement, success, and their supports. That the young person is not just the center point to it, but that young person is sharing space with these other folks that have their own lived experience with their own education and matriculation, that sometimes these past experiences or lived experiences is going to have a direct effect on how that young person shows up, their interest in the education as well. So you have to understand that a lot of times what other generations have often seen as the structural family representation is not always the norm in today's society. So we had to make different adaptabilities. It comes down to language. It comes down to the resources that we provide. It comes down to how we, I want to say, even approach one, right? Even when we're doing convenience and things of that sort, you have to be mindful of the priorities that family may have already in place that may trump or may come, I want to say, as far as a competitive towards education or livelihood, education or employability, education in social services, education or actual activities and actually enjoying life and having fun or traveling. All of these are things that you always have to be mindful of when trying to service young people, because that young person is often a part of a larger family and a larger community that you can't just provide one for the other and negate the other on the other end.
Dr. Holland, when some people in the same piece for the New York Times, it was suggested that that we should move towards a more extended family model, what sociologists called a vertical rather than a horizontal family structure. They said that during the pandemic, a Harvard study found that Americans ages 18 to 25 and mothers of young children were the demographic groups most likely to report miserable degrees of loneliness, and even before the pandemic, described a loneliness epidemic, which was particularly acute among seniors. Would you agree with that recommendation of moving towards a more of a vertical rather than horizontal family structure and model?
Yeah, good question. Yes, if the vertical is there.
Yeah.
Because in many situations with our Black community, the crime rate is very high. We know about, the deaths of our people. I mean, it doesn't matter what age, young or old. And so when that crime happens, on that level, it does interact. It does, it does something to that vertical suggestion that she is giving. Yes, it should happen, but oftentimes that may not be the case.
Right.
So
right.
I think, and the whole thing too, when I the first question you asked, I spoke about the children, how it impacts them, but it also impacts the elder.
Yeah.
As you spoke about the loneliness, the fact that they can be engaged with someone. And if you're engaged with people younger than you, you think younger, you act younger, your life is extended because of interacting with that younger generation. So it is powerful on both ends.
It's powerful, but it has to require a lot of communication. There has to be, like if you're going to create a multi-generational household, you have to put everybody on the same page. There has to be a family meeting or something where everybody can be on the same page. Everybody understands what's going on. Because what I noticed, and Oyen and Rashad and Dr. Holland, you know how we do in the Black community, be like, oh yeah, somebody, experienced a tragedy, they need a place to stay, and then they just drop in. And then, nobody is talking about, where they're going to sleep. Who's going to be responsible for the food? I mean, just the basic household, things that you need to know. And it creates tension. It creates a dynamic where you start to resent this person. I've experienced this personally, you know what I mean? Where you like, okay, we're trying to help a family member out and they need to find a place to live. You're like, okay. They're like, well, can we find I need to find a place to live. And the only you thinking to yourself like, oh man, they're about to ask me to live in, to come move in with me and my whole family. And you know what I mean? And if you don't have that proper communication, if there isn't, and I hate to use this term, Doc, a memorandum of understanding, if there is
norms, what are the norms that we're going to operate by?
You know what I'm saying? Like, if there's no agreement, like, okay, so if you coming in here, are you paying for your own food? I mean, because you're a grown ass adult, so I don't know. I'm not taking care of no adults around here. So there's none of that happens, and as a result of that brings more tension, that brings more pain and more drama into the household that probably could have been eradicated if there was just a simple conversation. What would be your recommendation, Dr. Holland, as folks are maybe in that situation, or they're just getting out of that situation, to make sure that the family relationships don't sour as a result of multi-generational families? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. And that's the whole thing of communication. Just being able, let's sit down and talk. Uncle so-and-so or aunt so-and-so or whatever has come across hard times. What is your thinking? I might be the head of the household, but you're a part of this family as well. What are your thoughts? How do we still become family as we move forward with bringing in this new person into our lives? And I think it would take away some of the hurt, the pain, because children or whoever's there, any family member, should be able to speak to that and to voice their opinion, and then decide how are we going to work together, in this way. So that would be my suggestion, really, the communication with one another.
Yep. And the person who's coming into that space have to be honest and authentic, saying, I'm only going to be here for either a short period of time. Because, Black folks, they'd be like, oh, yeah, I just need a couple of weeks. Next thing you know, weeks turn into months. And then next thing you know, their names end up on the lease. That's all I'm going to have to say, Doc. That's all I'm going to have to say. Dr. Jacqueline Holland, who is a professor of family and consumer science at the Great Morgan State University. Dr. Holland, thank you so much for your time. We would love to bring you back to have other conversations relating to this issue.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, don't go anywhere. We're going to continue to have some great conversations. I want to talk a little bit about Will Smith. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about this anymore, folks. I know. I wasn't planning on talking about this. I was like, all right, it's dead. Everybody and their grandmother is giving opinions about this. But I'm going to share with you the latest development about what happened at the Oscars that we just found out. And I'm just asking a question. Does it change anything? I'm talking to my culture crew, Oya and Rashad. I'm going to get their take on that. Plus, we got trends posting doing the most. Folks, we still got a lot of stuff to get to. So stay with us. It's all happening on the final 30 of the culture right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches. I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Yeah, folks. Yeah. I didn't want to go further into the story, but how can you deny this latest development in the whole Oscar slap controversy? Will Smith. Mr. Will Smith. Mr. Smith, apparently, folks, moments after he slapped Chris Rock, they took a break. We didn't see the break, but there was some footage. This is when Denzel came to Will Smith. This is when other folks came to Jada. And it was during that period that the Academy said that they reached out to, they talked to Will Smith's publicist to ask, oh, they didn't just ask, they firmly asked the publicist to tell Will Smith that he has to leave the Oscars after slapping Chris Rock. And guess what, folks? He refused. Oh, Will Smith is a real bad boy. Will Mike Lowry Smith. He gonna play by his own rules, folks. Let me bring back my crew here. Oyen, Adeoyen, Rashad. He didn't want to leave. The man didn't want to leave. So then, as a result of them, of Mr. Will Smith not wanting to leave, first he slapped somebody and then he refused to leave the premises. They weren't going to call the police. It's Will Smith, right? So that led them to now be in a space where they have to consider, Oyen, some serious disciplinary action. Let me just share with you what the statement that came from the Academy said, folks. This is the official statement from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Let me just share with you this, and I'm going to get through this. The Board of Governors today initiated a disciplinary, this was yesterday that this was released. The Board of Governors today initiated disciplinary proceedings against Mr. Smith for violations of the Academy standards of conduct, including inappropriate physical contact abusive or threatening behavior, and compromising the integrity of the academy. Consistent with the academy standard of conduct as well as California law, Mr. Smith is being provided at least 15 days notice of a vote regarding his violations and sanctions, and the opportunity to be heard beforehand by means of a written response. At the next board meeting on April 18th, the academy may take any disciplinary action, which may include suspension, expulsion, or other sanctions permitted by the bylaws and standards of conduct. Mr. Smith's action at the 94th Oscars were a deeply shocking, traumatic event to witness in person and on television. Mr. Rock, we apologize to you for what you experienced on our stage, and thank you for your resilience in that moment. We also apologize to our nominees, guests, and viewers for what transpired during what should have been a celebratory event. Things unfolded in a way we could not have anticipated. While we would like to clarify that Mr. Smith was asked to leave the ceremony and refused, we also recognize we could have handled the situation differently. Oyen, because I wanted to bother you with this today, Oyen, that's why I'm going to you first about this. The man refused to leave the academy. It forced the academy hand to move forward on this. What do you make of this? What do you foresee? What do you take from this, Oyen?
Well, for one, I'm exhausted by this.
You and me both.
This saga, as I'm sure we're all exhausted about it. I mean, it feels like I don't know, a bit of like too little, too late from the academy. It feels like the academy, for one, for those who are viewing at home, what was shared on the screen and what we saw was, we saw the slap. We saw, Will Smith taking action against Chris Rock, and then we saw him getting an award,
Right.
So,
right. From a slap to an award, which means that there was actually some time. There was a break in time in that situation. Like I've read that could have been like 20 minutes, but I don't know if that was the case, considering this was supposed to be a live broadcast. So I'm not sure how that would have worked out, but I'm sorry. Go ahead, Owen.
No, yeah, and then even in a speech, Will Smith did mention that Denzel spoke with him, and some people came up to him, and so we're aware that there was some time, but we were never aware of the academy kind of asking him to leave, and it is interesting that now they've come out saying we're going to review this, we're going to do this and that, but I feel like kind of the messaging and what we saw is pretty clear. We saw this happen, and now they're trying to figure out what to do and how to navigate the situation, because the Oscars doesn't necessarily want another scandal. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that I think it's a little late, but it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do in terms of what this disciplinary action could mean and what decision they come to with this.
What I mean, and Rashad, the Academy said that they should have handled this situation differently.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think they mean by that? Do you think they mean that first, where was security if that was the case? And people are asking on our live here on our stream, like, where was security? They always got security. So maybe not to make light of this situation, but a black person on security, they probably be like, man, what you want me to do? What? Oh, you want me to go and grab Will Smith, who just physically assaulted a man? Now you want me to grab him and tell him he has to go? First thing, I like all of his movies. And the second thing is he looks like he's pretty good with them hands.
Yeah, that was. I'm gonna start by saying exactly what y'all said. I'm exhausted, and I purposely have not spoke on this situation because I have been over everyone's 2 cents.
Oh, wow.
My piggy bank is full off of this, and I haven't used my voice at all to give no light to this situation besides right now. I believe what we're seeing is the Oscars, Motion Pictures, the Academy Awards doing the CYA, for them to keep their good standing and stay in good faith of the situation themselves. One, because it was so unexpectedly, and two, it doesn't attest to the character that we know of Will Smith. And one that, you know, in particular, Will probably is the most safest black man in Hollywood. So even if he was to stand up, I don't think security would have even been even readily aware that he was going to go up there and physically assault another man or another entertainer on live television. So who has that quick reaction to, you know, to determine what they're actually seeing in real time and how to move with it? I believe that, yeah, live shows is not always live. Sometimes they have the power to edit, and there was a lot of lapse in that before we saw him receive his award, which is understandable if he has this influence of power to say, hey, I still want to be here because this was a night where everyone knew I was going to be a part of this celebratory moment and receive an award that it was way past due. That despite this lack of character in the time it is, I still am deserving to be in this space, which is a level of privilege, right? Because everyone still wouldn't be able to do that, but it being Will Smith and what he means to the culture, what he has done for Hollywood and what he has been as a person.
Who he represents and what he represents.
Correct. So I think what the Academy is just doing, like, they're just covering their own behinds at this point, right? I think what they're doing, this statement could have went out Monday rather than on a Thursday,
on a Wednesday,
right? So it's like at this reality, it's like, huh?
My thing is this though. Here's the thing: does this change anything?
No.
I mean, does this change the conversation? Does this change anything? Like now that he refused, like obviously Will Smith is, I mean. We never would have thought in a million years that this guy, who is the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, this lovable, likable, you know, fun guy, would be considered to be a true bad boy of Hollywood. He smacked somebody. He refused to leave the Oscars. Like he got this streak in him right now. He got this rep. But does it change anything?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the most important question to ask. And I don't think it does. And even kind of going off of what was just said about the Oscars and them trying to cover their own behinds, you know, they're still recovering from the hashtag Oscars So White debacle that had a lot of people boycotting the awards show. And so I agree. I don't think that it would have been in their best interest to deny Will Smith that award in that moment. But also,
you think that it would have been?
It would not have been in their best
interest.
Oh,
no. Oh, okay.
To deny Will Smith that award at that moment because of, you know, all the history there. And also, you know, like Will Smith is not, you know, a kid that just came off the block a couple of years ago. Like he's been in this industry and in this business for a long time as well.
30 years.
Yep. And so he's already kind of cemented his image in our heads, you know, and in everyone's heads. And this is very out of character of that image. And so kind of grappling with that and figuring out what that means is going to be an interesting endeavor for the Black community, especially. But I don't quite think that this changes everything. And you see it in the public discourse, you know, there is this fierce like fight to justify it on both ends and to like make it okay.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I'm asking that question, Rashad, just because, you know, now the conversation has turned from two Hollywood people to successfully Hollywood Black men. It wasn't like a real brawl. It was just like one man attacking another. But, you know, it went from that place to now the protection of women and larger conversations have now come out of this moment. But I'm thinking like, okay, now that we know that he refused, some people have even gone as far as say, you know, mental health is very important, like to indicate that Will Smith is under great stress and strain and that he was outside of himself and this is not his character. I'm not sure how to process all of that, to be honest with you, bro.
Yeah, me either. One, I think the firm stance was, hey, I deserve to still be here. Everyone has had a moment of a lack of character, whereas though we need empathy and we need understanding and we need not to make a definitive decision or rationale without having either parties to make sense of how they experienced that moment. So I think the reality of it is this man deserved to receive his award for the work and the service that he has done and the representation that he in the work and his legacy in Hollywood and entertainment. He deserved to still be there. And I think that one moment that we can't count on one finger, we can count on one finger or a few fingers in one hand, how many times we've seen him act out, right? So it doesn't attest to that. So why would we allow that one moment of a lack of character to try to demolish all that he has done and what he is worthy of? Like, if it was me, I'd have sat still too. You can't remove me. I deserve to get this, and I'll deal with the repercussions and the consequences afterwards, and then reflect and give a public apology, and then restore a relationship that is probably better moving forward with Chris Rock. I think what it doesn't change much of anything besides give the power back to the Academy to decide how to move forward and try to make sure that incidents like this may not happen in the future. But who knows? You can't always try to solve everything in human time, because you can't understand what anybody may be going through, what they may be experiencing. And then in the space of them, like, it could be mental health, but it could have just been an emotional reaction. And in that case, it's okay too, because we're all human. But the reality is this man is still deserving of his accolades, his honors, and his recognition, despite the lack thereof character. And what I am more mindful of is trying to make sure that we don't experience, like we always experience, one lack of character demolish a man's integrity and legacy. And we watch the public castrate this black man and tarnish everything that he has worked hard for.
Yeah. McCole checked in on our YouTube page and said, the Academy needs to give Will a fine and he sit out for the 2023 Oscars. I believe that would be the appropriate action. Oyen, would you agree with that?
I don't know if I 100% agree. And like I said, I'm curious to see what the Academy does come up with. I do think that some form of repercussion is important to just show, so that, because I saw some conversation on Twitter or on social media saying, who's to say that something like this can't happen at another award show in the future. And so I do think that something needs to happen to establish a precedent of conduct, of what they expect. And, this is not something that they could have prepared for. So I don't know if expulsion or some of those more permanent kind of disciplinary actions would be necessarily appropriate for this kind of situation, but I do think that some kind of discipline would make sense in this case.
I mean, he's going to have to get some type of discipline. And look, this is America. This is Hollywood. The moment is actually viral. We already know that. But I think that people will forgive him. I think people will move on. I think people will just have, if you are Team Will Smith or Team Chris Rock, you just accept the moment for what it is, right? And then you kind of move on. But I do believe that there are some very valuable conversations that can be had around protection of Black women. What does that look like? What does that mean? I think there are some conversations that can be had certainly about, respectability politics. Like, when do you address your brother or your sister? Do you do that in a public setting, or do you do that behind closed doors? I mean, I think those conversations are still valuable to have, because why? People are still going to say stuff. I mean, even after this incident, we don't know what the next incident may be. I read Oyen and Rashad that people are like, oh man, this might be an attack on comedians. I don't know. I mean, Chris Rock just had a show a night or so ago, Oyen, and he just talked about this. And, I know that he said that Will Smith's award should be taken away, which is like, okay, if you want to take, like, that, his award is for his performance, not for his presence at the Oscars. His award is about King Richard. It's not about, him showing up at the Oscars and then he's like, oh, you get an award for that. No, you get an award for what you already did. Now, from this point forward, we will have to make that determination. But I don't think he should be giving his award away, because he played the role. That's what he did. That's what the award is for. So give it to him. If he earned that, he earned that. So you don't go back on that. But it's going to be very, very interesting, to say the least, to see how this whole thing plays out. And I'm especially going to be interested to see how the Academy holds it, because There have been white actors, major A-list white actors, who have done crazy things, and I don't know if they will be getting the same treatment, but we will have to see. Jim Carrey also said, did y'all see what Jim Carrey said? He was disgusted.
Yeah,
Jim Carrey
like
said he was
everybody else. I said, clear out all the top shelves in the pantries because people are reaching. We are witnessing a lot of people reaching and trying to make.
He was disgusted, and I don't know. I don't know. We will have to see, as they say in the movies, to be continued. Folks, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, trends, post, and doing the most. Stay with us. It's The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, let's talk about what's trending, what people are doing and posting, and who's doing the most. All right, let me just share with you two big things that I came across, Oyen and Rashad. First thing, the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Mr. Bruce Arians, has officially called it quits. He is moving to the front office of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a senior football consultant. And as he moves out, a black head coach moves in. Wow. Mr. Todd Bowles, who served as the defensive coordinator, is officially the new head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which brings up the number. Let's hear if I had a drum roll right now, I would play it. It would bring up the number of black head coaches to ding, 2. It would be 2 people. Todd Bowles and Mike Tomlin. Okay, 2 black head coaches. I don't know, but Tampa Bay said that, Bruce Arians said that he thought Todd Bowles was the best man for the team. He did not want to leave in a full-blown retirement without making sure that Todd Bowles had a space. So I think it's pretty interesting that we're seeing a second black head coach. I don't know if any one of you are football fans, but this is big considering Tom Brady has also decided to come back to play for next year. So what are your thoughts on that? If you have any thoughts on it, Rashad? Are you a Ravens fan? Okay, I get it.
I take it as a subtle win for the culture. At least
it's a subtle win for the culture. Okay.
Subtle win for the culture. We moving up the numbers, quantifiable. We move from 1 to 2. What's more better than 1 millionaire? 2, right? Yeah. Like Beyonce say, what's better than 1? 2. So we almost getting there. By 2035,
it's better than 1 billion and 2. Okay.
2
right.
was better than 1 head coach. 2.
All right.
So we're going to take that as a settled win for the coach. At least the man didn't have to croak over and die for him to get the position, but he did the honorable place of making space and saying that this is one of the most qualified men. And with him moving up, he'd rather have this black man to be the head coach of the team. And he already knows his skill sets, expertise, and he knows the team well.
Yeah,
so
it is. Congratulations, Mr. Coach Todd Bowles. And we're going to see how the team shapes up. All right. Also, what's trending right now. Did you know, folks, we got to give a big rest in power to the great Nipsey Hussle. It was 3 years ago today that Nipsey Hussle was gunned down in front of his own store in South Los Angeles, the Marathon store. And as you know, Nipsey's death caused a shockwave through the hip hop community. Thousands poured to the site of his store. He has been idolized and he is iconic at this point. Nipsey represents one of the few great LA, I'm not gonna say few, I'm gonna say he represents one of LA's top MCs and more importantly, businessmen, as he not only did successful ways in music, but he also had a dispensary and a host of other businesses. And his whole mindset, Oyen, was to make sure that black entrepreneurs, young black men, young black women get opportunities that were afforded to him. So he wanted to kind of share the love. But 3 years today, Nipsey Hussle was shot and killed. They have the gentleman who was responsible for the killing, but I just can't believe that it has been 3 years already. What's your take on that, Oyen?
Yeah, it's crazy how much time has passed, and how much of an impact his death has reverberated through the Black community. You see him kind of memorialized in TV shows and music still and artwork, all over the city. And yeah, it's amazing to reflect on his legacy and a little heartbreaking as well, for sure.
It is. And, it's like, when you listen to like his last album, I'm gonna be honest, like I really wasn't a big Nipsey Hussle fan. I knew about him. I knew, of course, about him and his relationship with Lauren London. But when I listened to his music, I was like, oh, I get it. I get it. Now I see it.
He was our generational Tupac. That's what I
on the West Coast. I would say definitely on the West Coast. I don't know if it was like that on the East Coast, but definitely like his album, I think it came out in 2018 or 19, if I'm not mistaken. It was 2018. But yeah, he definitely served as a vessel for the people. So it's been sad, and I know that Lauren London has continuously been trying to grieve, and it's a hard thing to grieve when you lose somebody in public, with who you lose somebody in public, and yet they were a public figure, and it's like you have to grieve all over again each year. But Nipsey lived life to the fullest, and we just we thank God that we were able to see some of the great talent that come from him, and may he continue to rest in power, man. Because Nipsey was a true giant in the industry, and he is great inspiration for a lot of people. If you ever go to LA, they have a bunch of murals of Nipsey. If you live in LA, if you go to LA, you can go through any part of South LA, you will find a bunch of murals of Nipsey and Kobe Bryant. Last time I was there, I just found that to be fascinating. That the love that they showed, and where the Marathon store once was the building. They don't. The last time I was there, it was all gated off, so you really couldn't go inside the parking lot or anything. It was like a construction site. But I think they should make that into a museum. I think they should honor Nipsey and others, from the West Coast, and use that space as a museum. But we will see how things go. But those were the two top trending things that was happening right now. Oyen, Rashad, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Oh, and let me just say this. I always appreciate my culture crew online. Damon, thank you so much for checking me. He said Lovey Smith is with Farajii's 3.5 coaches. Lovey Smith is with Houston, and the mixed coach with Miami. Yep. So that brings us to, he said 3.5. 3.5 black people. David,
that's not politically correct.
I know. I get what he's saying, though. You know what I mean? But, you can't have the half black person. But yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Damon. All right, Oyen and Rashad, thank you so much for being with me today. It's truly a pleasure. Always good to talk to you.
Peace.
All right, folks. That's going to do it for us. Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in. I want to, just thank all of our fantastic guests, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali and Dr. Jacqueline Holland, for being a part of the conversation. Look, these are the type of conversations that we're having each and every day. This is why we ask you to support us, blackstarnetwork.com, where you can support us, Black-owned media like never before. Support us on all platforms, Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, everything. And if you can't support us financially, just download the app for free. Let your family and friends know. Share all of our shows like The Culture. Excuse me, I had something in my throat. So share The Culture and A Balanced Life and The Black Table. And of course, the man who had the vision himself, Big Brother Roland Martin Unfiltered. But your support is everything to us. We cannot do this work unapologetically without you. And we want you every step of the way. We want you to be a part of this growth. We want you to be a part of this movement. We want you to be a part of this phenomenon. So support Black Star Network by going to our website at blackstarnetwork.com. Stay tuned. Up next is at 6 is Roland Martin Unfiltered. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. And I look forward to chatting with you tomorrow. Got some great guests that are going to be coming up next week as well. So we're going to just continue to bring you exciting conversations that you all can love, talk about, and relate to, and make sure y'all keep it locked here on the Black Star Network. I'm Farajii Muhammad. Talk to you tomorrow, God willing. Peace.